Hello YouTube, it's your boy TSP back again with another video. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe so you can see the new content related to psychology and psychology related topics that we'll be dropping on a weekly basis. And if you're not new here, drop me a like. Thank you for all your support. I appreciate it immensely. Please comment down below if there are certain things that you want to hear more about. I really appreciate any of your comments. But today, I want to start talking about depression in a little more depth and talk about why some people continue to experience depression even when maybe they got better or maybe they had some treatment or maybe neither of those things happened, but they're just wondering why are they still depressed. So first and foremost, I think it's important that we differentiate between sadness and depression. So sadness is an emotional experience that we all have. If we didn't have sadness, we couldn't have happiness. But sadness is something that happens to each and every one of us. It typically happens for a short period of time and it runs its course. Whereas depression is particularly marked by an extended period of several symptoms. So decreased mood, anhedonia, avolition, insomnia, a number of symptoms that go into this diagnosis of depression. And the reason why this distinction is important is that a lot of times when I hear people talk about sadness, they'll use the word depression. I was feeling depressed yesterday, but I don't feel depressed today. Well, we want to differentiate those things because sadness is not depression. So because those are not the same, and using the same word to describe that experience, we can actually make ourselves more likely to think that we're worse off than we are. So to say that I'm depressed when I'm experiencing sad emotions is something that can actually put us on a trajectory for engaging in a lot of the behaviors that are associated with developing and maintaining depressive disorder, which we'll talk about a little more down the path in this video. So that's first and foremost. So sadness does not equal depression. So we do want to focus on that and realize that. But when we think about a few things that are going on when people are still struggling with or dealing with depression, the first thing is that we have to realize that people who have depression have a tendency to not attend to significant changes in the world. So people who are depressed, they may have a tendency to not attend to their emotional and psychosocial state overall when they're in states when they're not depressed. So we do know that people who have a major depressive disorder have around a 75 to 85% chance of having a recurring episode. And so because of that fact, it's quite possible that you have a depressive episode, you have significant improvement or remission of those symptoms, which is quite common. A lot of people have improvement in symptoms and remission of symptoms even without treatment. But because there's a 75 to 85% chance of having recurrence of those symptoms, and they may have that recurrence, and they start attending to their experience only when they are again depressed. So that's one of the reasons why people may not realize that, hey, there was a time period when I was doing pretty well, where I wasn't depressed. And maybe I got out of that deep, dark pit that we often kind of see people describing depression as. And so that's one of the first things, is that attending to your mood, not just when you're feeling really down and depressed, is really, really important and helpful. The next thing that's going on for some people is that you may be part of a relatively small group of people who have what we call a persistent depressive disorder. So persistent depressive disorder is a low-grade mood disorder that typically lasts around at least 2 years. And so a relatively small amount of people, 20%, have that disorder. So because of that, during that entire time span, they are literally having these down, depressed, lack of desire to engage in activities, all these symptoms that we talk about in depression for over 2 years. And so if you're one of these people, whether you are one of these people who have a major depressive disorder or a person with a persistent depressive disorder, I do really strongly encourage you to look into getting help. All right, so we know that a combination of psychopharmacology, so psychopharmaceutics, and therapy is going to be the best way to treat a major depressive disorder. So I recommend you seeking out a professional in your area to get help with this. But let's look at the next level. So a lot of people view depression on a continuum with happiness. And this is actually another problem that people who experience depression may struggle with or deal with, because I don't think this is addressed a whole lot. So the opposite of depression is not happiness. Okay, I'll repeat it. The opposite of depression is not happiness. And the reason why that's particularly important to realize is that when people start to come out of those depressive states, so maybe you're one of those people who have MDD or major depressive disorder, and you kind of come out of that depression. You start feeling less depressed, but you don't feel that you're having that fullness of life and that really full enjoyment that you were expecting when you come out of that depressive episode. And unfortunately, one of the reasons that is that the opposite of depression, or which is a kind of psychopathology, a pathological functioning of our overall biopsychosocial state, is another psychopathological state, which is potentially anxiety or a manic episode. So the opposite of depression is actually going to be something like anxiety. And there's good research that actually supports this. And you also have to think about the fact that we see a lot of people who have depression who also have co-occurring anxiety, or the other way around, people who have anxiety who have co-occurring depression. And that's part of the reason why they run together, is that that is the continuum, is depression to anxiety, or depression and mania, rather than depression and happiness. And so what that points to is that there are a lot of other factors that we have to realize. So we look at this from a biopsychosocial model, and we're looking at a whole holistic perspective of that human being. We know that a lot of times people are focusing on the biological aspects of what it means to be depressed. And so we're focusing on the psychopharmacology. We're looking at medication taking. Well, even if the medication helps to bring you out of that mood, which for a lot of people it does, even if you're coming out of that mood, it means that there's still other facets or other factors in your life, with maybe the way that you are looking at yourself, maybe the way that you're looking at others, and maybe even the world in general, that need to be worked on, that need to be changed and directed. Because if we don't find ways of changing some of the ways that you're viewing these things, then you are at the risk of not only sliding back into some of those old ways and that depressive mood, but also that's going to prevent you from having that true happiness and that ultimate fulfillment and enjoyment of experience that you could have. Finally, one thing that's oftentimes that happens when people are depressed, or maybe even they're coming out of it, is that maybe you've been feeling this way for such a long time that it feels foreign to you to feel happy or to feel better. And so maybe you did come out of the pit and you were getting to the place where you started to feel happy. Sometimes when people are depressed and they start to have those experiences of, positive affect and positive emotion, it can become scary. In a strange way, it can become uncomfortable to feel comfortable. And I know that might sound weird for some people, but this idea of feeling uncomfortable with comfort means that we could go back to some of the things that would pull us back into those depressive states, that really lowered and prolonged mood, because of the fact that we are not comfortable with being happy. Maybe we're expecting things to not go well for us. We've had so many bad things happen to us in our lives that we're expecting to always feel bad. And so we have to find ways to not sabotage ourselves and sabotage our lives in those ways that pull us back into a depression, right? So, these are a few things that I want you to think about. And, if you're one of those people who identifies with this, I really do strongly encourage you to go and find help, seek out a psychiatrist and psychologist, and get help, get therapy, get medication for your depressive symptoms, And ultimately, hopefully, all together, we can make your tomorrow better than today. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and please like and subscribe. Have a nice day.